It's Friday night. It's the preview show. It's the No Nay Never podcast.
Hello and welcome to the preview show brought to you by the No Nay Never podcast. I'm your host Natalie Bromley, and joining me this week is Tom Whitaker because we're going to do a combination show. We decided at No Nay Never HQ that none of us really had the stomach to do an hour-long analysis show stomaching that debacle, shall we say, in the FA Cup against Bournemouth, or necessarily a quite quiet game at home to Brighton as well. So we decided to combine the two, and to do that we've got the lovely Tom on to talk to us. But joining both of us is the headliner himself, the main man, your star of the previous show, and that is Dave Statman Roberts. Dave, hello, how are you?
Hello, Natalie, and hello, Tom.
Hello, Tom. Welcome back. Your second preview show appearance. You're regular.
Very exciting. I feel like a dab hand at it now. Can I say, I feel like we've already spoken too much about that Bournemouth game as well.
That's true. We had a little bit of a preview before we went on air just to see what we were going to talk about, and my appetite has already gone for that game as well. But we will do. Well, let's get the quiz question out of the way first for last week, Dave, and then we'll dive straight into a little bit of a look at what's been happening over the last week. So, at the end of the Brighton and Hove Albion, God, you never say Brighton and Hove Albion. It's a Sunday name. At the end of our Brighton preview show, we asked you, in which year did Burnley meet Brighton in the FA Cup competition for the only time in our history? That is a tricky one, Dave. What was the answer?
Yes, it was a tricky one, going back a little bit in time, and the answer was 1961. And if there were any Clarets Plus subscribers who saw last Saturday's matchday programme, which does live on this season, we don't have any printed ones any longer, but we have it in digital-only format, they'll have seen an excellent photo of a young mascot alongside Burnley captain Jimmy Adamson. He was leading the team out at the Goldstone Ground for the FA Cup game in 1961. That match was a 3-3 draw, with Burnley coming from behind to draw in the game and get a replay. And we eventually went through after winning 2-0 at Turf Moor. That was the replay game in January, I think, 1961.
Excellent. Did we have any correct answers this week, Dave?
We had a couple. We had Adrian Caton was very quick off the mark with the answer, first through with the correct answer 1961, and also Sam Coleman got in touch with the correct answer as well. I think they were the only two we had.
Brilliant. Would you have known that, Tom? Did you know it, in fact?
Oh, I did not have a clue, no.
Yeah. I probably could have guessed within a 20-year... That's a bold prediction, isn't it? Within a 20-year gap at either side, I could have guessed. But no, that was a good question, Dave. Well, do keep listening to the end of the show because, of course, we will have another quiz question to test your Clarets knowledge. Tom, I'm gonna literally just set off the grenade and let you go. How are you feeling after the last week?
Well, I'll start with the positives. I thought the Brighton point was a good point. Probably one of the best performances of the season as well. I mean, apart from the disappointing defending for the corner for their goal, I thought we could and probably should have won that game by 2 or 3 goals. Second half, we absolutely battered them. We looked a better balanced attacking team with Vidra up front. We had a bit more about us. We were playing some nice little balls in the channels around the back to the defenders. I feel like it got the best out of McNeil as well. Coming inside a little bit more, having something a bit different to play off. So after that game, I mean, it would have been nice to have won, but you know, with West Brom and Sheffield United losing and Fulham only getting a draw, we didn't lose any ground, and you know, it was kind of a stabilising game after the Chelsea and Man City ones. So not disappointed after that one.
No, I'm not actually. I think it's a bit of a difficult one. I'll come back onto this in a second. In that, yeah, you're right. That second half performance was a brilliant performance. Now, I was kind of gutted that we didn't win. But I think what I probably took out of the Brighton game is that the two teams that were probably quite similar in the league, and their league positions probably reflected roughly where they are at this moment in time, but both kind of cancelling each other out. And it did almost become a little bit one of those games where they couldn't really afford to lose. But I think for Brighton, that was probably more important than us, because in the second half, we definitely went out to try and win it. But apart from, like you say, that scrappy goal, Brighton to me never really looked like they were taking the bull by the horns and trying to win the game. They were quite happy with the point. But what worries me, I think, Tom, is that, like you say, like we looked so much better up front with Vidra. We had a bit more about us. We just, got the best out of McNeil, but we still couldn't finish. And I'm just, it's this lack of goals in our side, whether it's finishing and being clinical with chances or creating them in the first place, is going to start causing us fundamental problems if we don't change it.
I think this season we're going to be all right because we're always going to have that solid base to work from the back four. You wouldn't be surprised to see us get 3 clean sheets in the next 3 games, for example. And we've always been good at nicking a goal. We've always been clinical. I think the worry is probably looking beyond this season. I think it's likely we're going to lose at least one of Tarkowski and Pope in the summer. You'd have to say with that, there's probably going to be the knock-on effect that we're going to probably concede a few more goals next season. And then we are going to have to improve, whether that's getting players like Wood and Barnes back to their top form, getting them more clinical in front of goal, whether that's adding some more goals from midfield. I do think, especially in the middle of midfield, I know that they're not necessarily those sorts of players, but Brownhill's got a good shot on him. Westwood chips in with the odd 1 or 2. Could they start contributing a bit more? But that's going to be the big worry next season, and we're going to have to improve going forward if we do lose these players defensively. Because, like you say, we're not going to be able to rely on nicking these 1-0 wins forever. I think we'll get away with it this season, but in the summer it's going to have to be something that we address for sure.
Yeah, definitely, and it worries me a little bit as well in that we are such a defensively minded side, Dave, and that's quite right. That is the bread and butter of this Burnley side. It's the DNA of a Sean Dyche side: is defend first and attack later. But the Premier League is evolving as a sport, and we're also being figured out. And like you say, without the Holy Trinity at the back. And we've got Charlie Taylor to come back as well, but without that Holy Trinity at the back, we start shipping goals. We could literally, to me, we need a massive change in personnel in the summer.
Well, yeah, I think we mentioned and touched on it previously that we didn't get anyone in the January transfer window, and although there wasn't a lot of action going on at other clubs, you might have thought that maybe we could have brought 1 or 2 in, because every successive window where we don't bring anyone in just makes the job pushes the issue further down the line, really, in terms of it being a much bigger issue for the summer. There's going to become a point where there needs to be a real big influx of players, and if you're doing that in one go, rather than spread, evolution rather than revolution, as they say, then it becomes more difficult. Then you've got players to bed in, and you've got more disruption. So we've perhaps made the problem difficult for ourselves, not just in this January transfer window. It's something that's kind of built and accumulated over maybe, certainly 2 or 3 transfer windows. But there's going to be a rebuild at some point further down the line. We just hope we can make the best of that, really. And Tom quite rightly says that the likelihood of you losing certainly Tarky in the summer, that's that would be a big loss to us. To get a player of that quality in is going to be a big ask.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, Tom, how are you feeling about our league position, generally speaking? Well, we were talking about this in our group chat last night. Obviously, the news has come out this week that Callum Wilson's going to be out for 6 to 8 weeks, which is going to be a massive concern for Newcastle. Newcastle are 10 points clear of Fulham at the point that we record this podcast. And I think, to me, with only 15 games left of the season, to overturn a 10-point swing is... that's just asking too much. It's you've got to win 4 games and lose and get Newcastle to lose 4 games, and at some point you're going to run out of time. So I think for me, Newcastle are probably going to be all right. I also think we're probably going to be all right. 8 points clear of Fulham as well. Again, it's going to be very difficult for them to pull that back. I guess the problem will be is that if Fulham beat us in that game in hand, then they claw that gap back to 5 points. She kind of feels a little bit uncomfortable still, doesn't it? We're not completely out of the woods yet.
Yeah, the next week is going to be huge, isn't it? Because Palace, I think, especially the amount of injuries they've got, Zaha being out, that's very winnable. We could be going into the Fulham and West Brom home games with a good cushion, an even better cushion than we've got now. The pressure's on them to come out. They can't afford to keep drawing. I think the reason they're going to get relegated ultimately is because they don't win games. I know Richard's a big fan of Fulham, and we talk about him in the chat a lot.
We do laugh at him, don't we?
November the 30th was the last time they won a game. I mean, people say they're playing well, and they are. And I remember they got a draw against Liverpool, and they played very well, but it was a draw. Do you know what I mean? We didn't play that well against them, and we beat them. Brighton didn't play. I mean, Brighton did play well against them, actually, to be fair to them, but they beat them. They are beatable. So I think even if even if we don't get 9 points out of these next 3 games, then those 3 teams at the bottom are really going to struggle to put enough wins together to overtake anybody. But if we can beat Fulham and West Brom back to back, I think that puts it to bed, to be honest. I think if we win the next 3, that puts us on, was it 31, 32 points, something like that.
Yeah.
I think even with that, you're probably only needing 1 or 2 more wins at most. But I think probably even with that would keep you up. And then we can look up, and it would be nice to sort of finish the season as we did the last one, where we're fairly safe, we're comfortable, we're not worried about going down, and we can put a few wins together maybe and start looking towards the upper reach of the table. I think it's going to be difficult to finish above like 14th, 15th, but I really don't think we're in any danger, and we can put that to bed once and for all this week, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Dave, what about you? Are you still? I know, because I ask you this just because you're a little worrywart, and I do worry about you being a worrywart sometimes. So, are you still nervous about relegation? Do you think we've done enough so far? What are you thinking generally?
I think we've done really well to get that 8-point gap after the start we had, and to be in the position we are and have built up that gap. That's really good. You made the point about Fulham, but obviously we have to play Fulham twice. So if the worst were to happen, only to lose both of those games, then that does perhaps put a different reflection on things.
Oh, that's really
Yeah,
true, actually. I'd forgotten
yeah,
about that, of course. Yeah, I forgot. We've still got to play the return
we
fixture
do.
yet. Oh, well
So
done,
that
Dave.
potential
Well done.
worry, but these 3 games are three games within 8 days, whatever it is. It's a real opportunity, but also a threat, isn't it? We've got the power in our own hands if we get some really good results in these games to put even more pressure on those teams down the bottom, particularly for West Brom and Fulham, those 2 games. Although, as we mentioned already, and we'll come on to Palace, it's a winnable game, particularly in their situation, the number of injuries they've got as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Tom, we may as well rip off the band-aid and let's dive into this. One of the advantages of being relatively safe or being in a more comfortable league position is that you get to enjoy a cup run. We had this week one of the best opportunities we could to get to the quarterfinals of the FA Cup. However, Dyche stepped in. No, I said that, it's such a clickbait thing to say. Where do we start unpicking that Bournemouth game, Tom? Dare you?
It's so difficult, isn't it? Because every year we know what's going to happen. We know we're going to put a weakened team out, and we're not going to try a leg, and we're going to get knocked out. But every year we convince ourselves maybe this is the year. Maybe we've had enough seasons in the Prem now. Maybe the squad's a bit stronger, and probably if we'd have been knocked out in the MK Dons game where we so nearly were, we'd have said, another season, and our hopes wouldn't have got up. But I think the problem we had this season was we put a half
Yeah.
decent team out against Fulham. Obviously, they're a Premier League team, and we played them off the park. We beat them convincingly, and he thought, "Oh, hang on, maybe he's actually had a word this year," and said, "Do you know what? Let's have a bit more of a go," because that's probably the best we've played, as well as we've played certainly in a cup competition since Dyche has been manager, I would say.
Definitely,
Yeah.
definitely.
So I think that's got everyone's hopes up a bit. That coupled with the fact that we knew we had a winnable game in the next round, and then you start looking beyond it, and then you see the lineup he's picked, and he's gone back to picking a Milton Keynes style team rather than a Fulham style team. I think probably in hindsight, the fact that Fulham are in the same position as us meant that they were probably trying even less than we were in the 4th round. But yeah, every year I go to these cup games and I say to myself, look, don't expect anything because we're not going to do anything. And then we only have to win one or put in our decent performance, and already we're all dreaming of Wembley or not Wembley, as the case may be. And it was a real. I think because we'd had that Fulham performance and we'd had that bit of hope, and the quarterfinals was in touch and distance. That's why that performance and that team selection and everything. That's why it felt like such a big kick in the unmentionables, because it was so tantalisingly close. So yeah, it was really, really disappointing. And I've just seen that Bournemouth have got Southampton in the quarterfinals as well, so that would have been a winnable quarterfinal.
Not sure it would have been, to be honest. Southampton are a good side, and Southampton are a better side, and Southampton are in a position where they genuinely can go and try and win the cup because of their league position. It would have been at turf, fair enough, but I'm not entirely convinced that we would have. It was probably one of the more winnable ones in the latter stages, but I'm not convinced we would have won. I do wonder, Tom, just picking up on what you said then, and I wonder, Dave, if you think that this is a thing. I wonder whether Dyche playing a strong team in the last round of the FA Cup was more to do with getting a psychological edge over Fulham in the league and nothing to do with wanting to progress in the cup.
Possibly, but I think it's difficult. I think the tactic definitely worked. We made 9 changes for Fulham, and I think plus in that game it was a case of there were players coming back who, we didn't have a behind closed doors game, so they actually used that game to come back as well. So it benefited them from that point of view. And it was a good performance, good result, really good day down there, and we just couldn't repeat it. I think that the one thing perhaps that went against us on Tuesday night was the fact that Eric Peters wasn't playing. That sounded like it was a last-minute hiccup, the fact that he was originally in the lineup and then obviously it was pointed out that he couldn't play because of the suspension. He was booked in the previous 2 rounds. He may well have even been captain for the game because he captained us down at Millwall. So he may well have even been originally down as captain for the game, but obviously Phil Bardsley captained the side. And we just looked a little bit light. We never looked at the races at all with the game against Bournemouth, and we got what we deserved, really.
Yeah, I've got to say, I thought Eric Peters was really good in that Fulham game. I was really impressed with his performance. I thought he did a terrific job. I don't know if I'm maybe being a little generous, but if you compare him to another fringe player of the Dale Stephens variety, if I dare mention that name, and you just think, I thought he's done a really good job in trying to cover for Charlie Taylor. So we'll see where we get to. I didn't see Dyche's interview, Tom, after the Bournemouth game. There were a couple of people did say to me that it was actually quite an honest assessment. Is that fair? I'm going to read it as soon as I come off air.
Do you know what? I've got to the point with these interviews now where I feel like if it was really an honest assessment, he'd say, "I don't care," or he wouldn't even turn up. You know what I mean? I think
that's fair.
I think you made some fair points. I think like the one about if Rodriguez had scored that chance, then it would have been a different outcome maybe, or it would have been a different game certainly. And he has missed a sitter. Honestly, I think that he's not bothered. And I think if he was really honest, then that's what he'd say. And at least this year we haven't had to travel to the ground, and we haven't had to stump up the money to watch it. But
True.
For me, that if he was honest with us, and obviously there's many reasons that he can't be, but that would be an honest interview for me, saying I'm not really bothered. I just care about the Premier League, and I don't care about what happens in the FA Cup. So yeah, but I wouldn't give him too much credit for the
say that though, can I? Yeah. Quick one just before we move on to actually the preview show for the Palace game, Tom. I saw a lot of tweets on social media that I genuinely agreed with. If it had been Woody who'd have missed that sitter that Jay missed, it would have literally been pitchforks out and people screaming for Wood to never ever set foot in the side again. Do you think that it is as simple as we do have a little bit more love for Jay because he is one of ours? Or, I was furious that he missed that chance, really furious. Or, I guess I'm trying to get at what is the problem? Are people too nice on Jay, or are they just too harsh on Woody, or a combination of the both?
Yeah, I think they definitely are too harsh on Wood. He does miss chances, but I think with the goal record that he's got for us, if he didn't miss chances, he'd be banging 20 goals this season. He'd be playing for a bigger club, basically.
Absolutely.
For me, I think with Rodriguez, actually, that was the first time I've seen him get quite a lot of criticism for this season. Obviously, he's not played well. I don't think he's not had a run in the team. He's had injuries. I think there's mitigating circumstances as to why we've not seen the best of him this season. But I saw him get quite a lot of criticism, and I saw there was quite a lot of sack every single one of these players. None of our reserves is good enough.
Yes.
I do think it's when you look at these games, it's not a coincidence that these players all play badly in the cup games. It's not. I don't think everyone who played in the Accrington or the Lincoln or the Burton games needed to be sold. The common denominator is the way they kind of coach for this game. So I don't think necessarily every player who played in that game is bad or wasn't trying or didn't care. I think it's just how it is for us in the cup games. And I wouldn't be writing Rodriguez off or saying he needs to go because he missed that chance or because he didn't play particularly well. I think he's still got a lot to offer.
Yeah, and I can be furious at him, but without wanting to say you never play for us again. It's just I always find it really interesting, and I think depending on your Twitter algorithm and who you follow, like because there's a lot of Burnley fans on Twitter, and obviously you don't follow all of them. Whoever was appearing on my timeline was genuinely like very supportive of Jay and just being like, it's all right, put your arms around him, which is what I want them to do with Woody. That's, you know what I mean? It's like that's what I've been trying to do with him, but yeah, it's an interesting one. We'll see where we get to on that.
Opposition stats.
Dave, let's move on. Let's actually get stuck in now with what we came here to do, and we'll keep Tom with us because we want him to stay, and we will come on to preview, of course, this weekend's fixture, which is Crystal Palace away, Saturday the 13th of February, 3 p.m. kickoff, which is live on Sky Sports. Let's kick us off, Dave, with the recent history, please.
Yes, Burnley have played Crystal Palace 8 times at Selhurst Park since 2009, which is defined as our recent history for the purposes of our preview show. We failed to win any of the 3 championship meetings there between 2010 and 2012. We picked up 1 draw but suffered 2 defeats. But our record in the 5 Premier League games since then, down at Selhurst Park, is much better. There have been 2 wins for Burnley, 1 draw and 2 wins for Crystal Palace. The Premier League draw was a 0-0. That was in September 2014, when Burnley narrowly failed to take all 3 points after Scott Arfield's late penalty was saved one-handed by Julian Speroni. But a 2-0 Burnley win in late April 2017 was a memorable occasion, which we'll be reminiscing about later in this episode. Last season's match took place in June. That was during Project Restart, and Burnley were narrow 1-0 winners. That was thanks to a goal from captain Ben Mee.
Excellent.
Highlights and lowlights.
Well, first section that we need to look at, the highlights and lowlights section. Kicking us off with the lowlights section, what did you pick for this section?
Well, there were a couple of candidates for this week's lowlight, including a heavy 5-0 defeat at Selhurst Park in 2008. But as devastating results go, there was a more significant one from back in 1983. Burnley had a couple of impressive cup runs. Remember them? During the 1982-83 season. That resulted in a semi-final appearance in the League Cup, or Milk Cup as it was that season, and also a place in the quarter-finals of the FA Cup. But our league form had not been good enough. Palace and Burnley were both struggling near the bottom of the table, and it all came down to the final match in May 1983. A point would have been good enough for Palace, whereas Burnley needed to win, but a 1-0 victory for the Eagles confirmed Palace's survival and sent Burnley down. Ian Edwards' second-half goal was the only difference between the two sides and began Burnley's slide towards the basement division.
Oh dear, that's not a good low light. Let's cheer us up a bit then, Dave. What have you picked as a highlight?
Well, for our highlight this week, we're going back to the 2016-2017 season for a vital victory, which paved the way for Burnley's Premier League survival, which had begun to look in serious doubt. We'd failed to win in any of our previous 17 away trips in the league that season, but there was still hope we could find an elusive victory on our travels to help the effort to stay in the division. However, Crystal Palace were not going to be a pushover. They'd actually won at Anfield the previous weekend, and although we didn't know it at the time, that result was Liverpool's last Premier League defeat there at Anfield for almost 4 years, until Burnley broke the 68-match streak just last month. In the game, though, down at Palace, an early opening goal from Ashley Barnes, and then another late on by substitute Andre Gray helped to deliver an away win by a 2-0 scoreline, and Burnley went on not only to survive that season, but to finish 7th and qualify for Europe in the following season.
Excellent. And we're going to put a link in the show notes for that, aren't we, for that particular little... Oh, excellent.
Fixture Flashback.
Well, the first of our new features for the second half of the season is our flashback. Now, Dave, how does flashback work? Tell our listeners.
Fixture Flashbacks, basically your chance to get involved in the preview show. Every week we're asking you to send us your match day memories from a particular game from the past against our next opponents, and we'll look to feature that on the relevant preview show coming up. Ideally, we'd like you to record your thoughts and send them through to us, but if you don't feel comfortable making a recording, we'll also take written submissions and read them out.
We will indeed, and our show notes this week say Pause for Matt to insert recording. Except we don't have a recording because listeners, you let us down this week. Nobody sent one through. But friend of the show, VIP John Robertson, did give us a memory and said that we could read it out on the show. So, John Robertson, I will offer you Crystal Palace 5, Burnley 0. Carlisle sent off very early and Palace rampant in search of securing a playoff spot on the final day of the season. An excellent day out, though. Well, I'm quite glad you could see through the mire of that one, young John Robertson. Dave, encourage our listeners to send something in, please.
The games are coming thick and fast, so we want to hear your memories of any past home game against Fulham and West Bromwich Albion. So please record your thoughts. If you could record them and drop us an email, that's podcast@nonaynever.net. There's actually a couple of websites that might make it easier to make a recording. If you aren't particularly tech savvy, obviously you can do it yourself from your PC if you're comfortable doing that. There's a really good website I found called vocaroo.com. That's VOCAROO.com. It's totally free to use. There's no registration required. You go on there, and provided your laptop or your phone's got a microphone in there, which most of them do these days, you just click a button, you record. There's no limit on the recording, so you can make it as long or short as you want, and it then creates a link, and you can email that link through to us. It's really easy to do if you're not comfortable doing it. So I would recommend and hope that people can do that and get involved on future preview shows.
Excellent. Thank you, Dave.
Heroes and villains.
Moving on. Well, I think this might be my favourite section, actually. Our heroes and villains. Who's our hero?
For hero, we could easily have chosen either Ashley Barnes or Andre Gray as our hero this week for the goals they scored in Burnley's memorable 2-0 win at Crystal Palace in 2017, which we've just mentioned. But we like to share the accolades around, and instead we've opted for Burnley's goal scorer in last season's victory at Selhurst Park. Captain Ben Mee epitomises Burnley Football Club and is already a modern-day club legend, although he doesn't often get his name on the score sheet. This was actually his 7th goal for Burnley. We won 1-0 down at Palace, if you remember, in Project Restart. But he has scored again twice for us since then this season. In this particular match, Ashley Westwood's floated free kick found Ben Mee near the penalty spot, and he was able to guide a header in past Vicente Gaeta to score the only goal of the game. And we know that lockdowns haven't been easy for any of us, but spare a thought for Ben and his wife Sarah, who were also coping with the birth of their daughter Olive, who was born 16 weeks premature in May, just a matter of days before the players returned to training ahead of Project Restart. Olive wasn't able to go back to the family until September. That was around the time she'd originally been due, but is thankfully making good progress. The match also marked Ben Mee's 300th league appearance for the club, and we think he's well worthy of the recipient of our Hero Award for this preview show.
Yeah, well, I would make Ben Mee hero every single game if I could. On the flip side then, and I'm hoping that we're bringing this back down to some more acceptable levels, who have you picked as your villain?
For this week's villain, we're going to go back to the year 2000 and the League Cup second leg tie. Burnley had come from behind to draw 2-2 at Turf Moor. In the second leg at Selhurst Park, Andy Cook scored for Burnley just before half-time. It stayed that way until injury time, right at the end of the second half. Burnley thought they were through, but up popped Andy Linnigan with a goal in the second minute of injury time to pull a goal back and take the match to extra time. After that, there were no further goals, and so Palace went through on the slightly odd League Cup definition of the away goals rule, which doesn't come into play until after extra time. So for scoring the goal that knocked Burnley out of the League Cup, we're invoking a 21-year grudge to make Andy Linnigan our villain this week.
Excellent. I love it. Finally then, Dave, who is the referee for this week's game?
We've got Michael Oliver. He's going to be in the middle at Selhurst Park on Saturday. He's refereed one previous Burnley game so far this season. That was the narrow 1-0 home defeat to Spurs in October. We haven't had the best of results in his recent games over the last few years. In fact, the 1-0 win we had at the London Stadium in July, again during Project Restart, was the only one of his last 11 games in charge that Burnley have won, with 2 draws and 8 defeats in the others. Michael Oliver's taken charge of 2 previous matches between these 2 teams. He was the referee when Burnley beat Crystal Palace 1-0 at Turf Moor in September 2017. That was the last match for manager Frank de Boer, who was succeeded shortly afterwards by current manager Roy Hodgson. And he was also in charge in January 2018 for a match at Selhurst Park, which Crystal Palace won 1-0 with a first-half goal from Bakary Sakho. VAR for this match on Saturday, Australian Jared Gillett. He'll be the video assistant referee, just over 20 miles away at Stockley Park. And yes, I did go to a map and check how far Stockley Park was from Selhurst Park.
I would expect nothing less of you.
Statman Dave's Stat of the Week.
Well, we know that that's not the end of it. We know you like to spoil our listeners, Dave. So why don't you dig deep into the bank of stats and give us your miscellaneous stat of the week.
This week's stat is relating to Crystal Palace and the fact that they've struggled in recent times when they've missed their star player, Wilfred Zaha. He didn't play in Palace's 2-0 defeat to Leeds United on Monday, and the Eagles' playing record without Zaha is a stark one. They have lost 17 of their last 19 Premier League games in which Wilf Zaha did not play, and they failed to score in 15 of these 19 games. Burnley fans may recall that he didn't play in the reverse fixture earlier in the season, which Burnley won 1-0, and that was our first Premier League win of this campaign. Indications are that he will also be absent this Saturday.
That is good for us. Well, before we move on to our look at the game, we, as we keep saying to you every week, we're not yet sure whether or not we have got an opposition view. We believe that we're going to speak to Jay Crame from the Eagles Beak. And in 3, 2, 1, you will know whether you get to hear from me or not. 3, 2, 1.
Opposition view.
So Palace this season have been very much Jekyll and Hyde. Difficult to know what we're going to expect from the side week in, week out. We go on a run of a couple of games, get a couple of wins or a draw and a win, and then it's a difficult, disappointing result straight afterwards. And it feels very much stop-start in a season which is very condensed. We know it's not easy after the last season and a stoppage halfway through, and it's difficult without fans. I think a lot of teams that rely on their fans to support them, like a team like Palace does. You know, it's no secret that the fans at Selhurst Park are very voices for us, and I think the players do miss that. And I think a lot of players miss that. I think you see teams and players, lack of celebrations, and because it's just running them all, they're going through emotions and that kind of stuff. So I think from that perspective, it makes it doubly difficult. And in the current climate that we're in, the pandemic and everything else that's been going on for the last 12 months or more. It makes things a little bit privileged when it comes to football, and footballers have been directed in terms of, the privileges and the breaking the rules and stuff like that. And it's a minefield, it really is, and not making excuses at all. It's been a tough season for Palace, but actually when you look back at it, if we'd have beaten Leeds on Monday night in what was a really poor performance, and again that just sums up our season. We had 2 really good wins, and then we didn't turn up at Leeds. But if we'd have won that game, that would have been our second best points tally at this stage of the season in the top flight. So, when I say it's been very Jekyll and Hyde and fans have been disappointed with the season and disappointed at the players and the management and that kind of thing, it's actually, when you look at the stats and look at it on paper, it's actually not been a bad season, and we're not far away from, pushing into the top 10, which is something. We finished 10th, our highest finish in the Premier League. So, when you take everything into consideration, it's actually not a bad season, but some of the performances have kind of overruled exactly where we are and some of the decision making as well. So it's been a difficult one. There's no doubt about it. Looking ahead to the game, Burnley's visit to Selhurst Park is one where they're looking to continue their winning streak. I mean, 2 1-0 wins against Palace. They're looking to make it a 3rd in a row without conceding as well. And I'm hoping that Palace will know that and will look at that and owe Burnley one, I would say, in this game. And it's certainly a game that we should be looking to win at home. But we know what happened at home last season. It was very much a bit of a smash and grab. But no disrespect to Burnley. I mean, Burnley did what they needed to do in that game and got the points. And we've done that before in games. So Palace need to learn from that and on Saturday and be ready to match Burnley in that game. In terms of Palace's main threat, I mean, obviously Wilfried Zaha looks like he's going to miss the game, second game in a row that we're not going to have him for through a hamstring injury. And that's really tough because everyone knows the statistics around Palace and not having Wilfried Zaha, and it's difficult for us to win without him. But any team, like us that has a star player like Wilfried Zaha will miss him, when he's not playing and when he's having an off day. He's that much of a dynamic player that can do something from nothing. So many team that would have a player like Wilfried Zaha would miss him. So I think a lot is made of that in terms of Palace, and a club like Palace, and having a player like Zaha, it's just he's our best player by some distance. But having said that, we've got somebody who not waiting in the wings, but has already shown in the Premier League this season that he can be a real threat, and that's Eberechi Eze. Brilliant signing from Queen's Park Rangers in the summer. I don't think a lot was made of the signing, actually. I think a lot of clubs were looking at him and perhaps didn't want to take the gamble. Scored quite a few goals for QPR last season in the Championship, and there was a probably question mark over whether he could do it in the Premier League. But he's come in and done it. He's scored goals. Free kick against Leeds was fantastic. That goal against Sheffield United, picking up the ball and running with it. You could argue that defenders could have done better with his tackles, but he glides with the ball. He picks up the ball and just glides and makes up ground really quickly with it, and it's hard for players to take the ball off him. And he's quite a different player to Wilf, to be honest. He's very different on the ball. Wilf's a very, very in your face kind of player, and not so much speed now, but skill. But Eze is just picks up the ball and makes up ground so quickly. It's as if he's on roller skates, which is bizarre. So I see him as our real main threat in this game this weekend if he can turn on the form and being back at Selhurst Park. He scored goals at Selhurst and hopefully should do that. In terms of formation, who knows, Roy? Really don't know. It's chopped and changed recently, and we look to attack players and have an attacking lineup, and it hasn't really worked for us. Fans want to see attacking football from Roy and Palace, but we've got I think that's a frustration. We've got a very talented squad of players this season, and a lot of fans think that we should be doing better. I think you have to take that with a pinch of salt, with the way that football is happening this season. I think footballers like I mentioned earlier, they're privileged, and they're in a position where they're playing and not in front of fans. It's very different for them. They're still carrying on doing what they normally do, but they don't have the fans there, which I think is a big thing. But not making excuses. Palace probably should be better in a higher position than they are. A lot of question marks about Roy in the summer as well. He's in his last year of his contract. It runs out in the summer, as do quite a number of our squad. I think it's about 12, 13, maybe 14 players that are out of contract in the summer as well. So a big turnover in the summer we're looking ahead to. But looking forward to the game. Wish Burnley the best of luck for the rest of the season, and hope to see you again next season.
Okay, so boys, how are we feeling? Tom, let's come back to you for a little bit. Give young Dave's voice a little bit of a rest. How are you feeling about the game at the weekend, generally speaking?
Yeah, I think it is a good time to play them. I was looking at the list of their injuries, and there's quite a few players out, and the big one obviously is Zaha. I think they look a completely different team when he's playing as to when he's not. I know that when we beat him at the turf, he was missing for that one. So yeah, I think basically if I look at Crystal Palace's team sheet and Wilfried Zaha's not playing, I'm pretty optimistic. I don't think they've got a lot of goals in them, so I'd like to think if we can go there, attack them, get the first goal. I think it might be a similar story to what we had in the lockdown last season. Get the first goal and we can sit on that, and I'd be confident that we could hold on to a 1-goal lead. So I think it will set us up really nicely if we can get those 3 points as well. Puts all the pressure on Fulham and West Brom, not only to get results this weekend, but also when they come to the turf. So yeah, I'm optimistic. I'm feeling good. I'm ready to banish the spectre of Bournemouth and get 3 points at Selhurst on Saturday.
Brilliant. That's the problem, though, isn't it, Dave? What Tom was saying there. It's like you'd like to think we'd go and attack them, but the problem is that we just don't do that, do we? And it's kind of frustrating.
Yeah, it's a rarity for us to go all out in the first half and try and get an early lead and take the game to sides. It's more a cautious approach, and we'll kind of work our way into the game, maybe try and sneak a goal and we don't worry too much if we haven't scored the first half, because we'll try and do it in the second. Maybe it is an opportunity, but we are wary. I mean, away games are difficult. We don't win many of them. We look back at history and the percentages, and although our away win percentage is better now than it was, it's still not brilliant. It's only like something like 1 in 5 away games. Although obviously you've got to factor in there's a lot of the big six sides you're playing where you're getting much lower percentage than that. So you should be getting a higher percentage against the other teams in the division. I think the timing could have come right for us in terms of their injury list. They've got about 9 or 10 players out. We mentioned already about Will Sahar. It's fairly sure he's not going to be available. There's a whole host of other players that aren't available as well. So from that point of view, it could well be a good time to play them. And yeah, we need to try and take advantage of that, really, and maybe for once try and take the game to the opposition, even though it is away from home.
Yeah, definitely. Tom, actually, Dave, do we have any injury news yet? Do we know
Yeah,
whether...
they had the press conference earlier today. I think it's a little bit cagey. I think Josh Brownhill, looks like he's more likely than not to be back. Jack Cork, I'm not too sure. They mentioned possibly about Popey having a knock as well, although I think he'll be available. Of the others, I would doubt any of those will be back. I don't think Woody will be back. I don't think Charlie Taylor will be back. Who else was there?
That's it,
yeah.
isn't it?
So
yeah, I
think when they say they touch and go, they're usually more. Well, they usually don't play when they touch and go. Put it that way.
Yeah, for about 3 months. So Tom, on that basis, then, who do you choose up front? Stick with Vydra?
Yeah, I think just the team looks better with Vydra. I wouldn't say necessarily he's playing that well himself. Obviously, we were talking about finishing earlier, and I think he was guilty of missing a couple of decent chances in that Brighton game. And there's been a few people saying as well, it's been a long time since Rodriguez has scored in the Prem. It's been even longer since Vydra scored in the Prem. But having said that, for what he brings us overall, I would definitely have him in there. And I think him and Barnes linked up really well in the Brighton game, so I'd have absolutely no issues playing them two up front again. I think they've earned another start together.
I would agree with that. Score prediction then, Dave?
I'm going to be cagey and go 1-1.
Of course you are. Shock. Tom, score prediction from you?
It's normally 1-0 either way, isn't it? But I'm going to push the boat out this time. I'm going to say 2-0 to Burnley.
Excellent, well done. I'm going to go one further and I'm going to say 3-0. I'm feeling optimistic. I know. Well, do let us know what your score predictions are if you are listening to this preview show ahead of the game. Don't send them if the game's already been done, because that would be cheating. You know how to get in touch. You can tweet us at nonanever, or you can email us at podcast@nonanever.net.
Fantasy Premier League update.
Dave, second half of this week's preview show is, of course, the No Nay Never Fantasy Premier League, which in this case is when Tom snoozes because he doesn't play it. But that does mean, of course, that I am not last in the current No Nay Never panel in terms of places in the league. So, game week 22 and 23 we need to catch up with this week, don't we, Dave? So take it away. What's been going on?
We do, yes. We've got, when we recorded last year, you weren't with us, Matt and I recorded for the Brighton preview. There was still the match on, wasn't there? It was Chelsea and Spurs were still playing on the Thursday when we recorded, so we weren't able to get the Kings of Game Week or a league table update. But we have got now an updated league table. We'll do that first, and then we'll go through our positions, and then we'll look at the Kings of Game Week 22 and 23. So in terms of our No Nay Never League, our top 5 as it stands after Game Week 23, we've got Steve Holden is up to 5th place with 1,441 points. We've got Gary Proctor up to 4th place with 1,449. Sean Danaher, who was our guest last week, he had a good week. He's gone up to 3rd position now on 1,454 points. And then we've got Charlie Binns, who had been a leader for a while. He's in 2nd position on 1,478. And our leader is Adam Dennett, 1,486.
Well done, Adam. What about the None and Never team, please? How are we all doing?
Well, you are 235th out of... Well, we must have lost someone. I checked. It was 241. We've now got 240, so someone's dipped out. So they haven't been kicked out by me. They've kicked themselves out. So there's now only 240 teams, not 241, and you are 235th. And I'm insistent that the bottom 10 is the relegation zone. You don't have just bottom 3. No, I'm the admin. I make the rules.
Wow! If you're in the bottom 5, it'd be the bottom 3.
No,
honestly,
no. There's no danger of that.
Tom, help me out here. Who's ever heard of a bottom 10 for a relegation zone? That's just ridiculous.
I think we'd be in trouble, wouldn't we, if there was a bottom 10 this season? So, yeah, I'm not in favour of that concept at all.
Bottom 4 would be in trouble. See, Dave, you're outvoted. I mean, I'm not in the relegation zone. Go on then. How are you doing?
Well, I didn't have a very good week either. I was down to 145th place. I'm on 1,199 points. I'm still almost 300 points ahead of you. So I think that's an unassailable lead, I think, pretty much, with even with almost half the season to go. Richard Steele, though, he leads the way in our Podcasters Mini League, but he's 94th place in our No Nay Never League on 1,265 points. Although it's very close in the middle of that table, a good week can easily result in a rise or fall of 20 or maybe 30 places or more, depending on how you do for the week. So all to play for in the middle of the league. Those down the bottom, struggling really.
I'm not struggling. I've got better things to do with my time. What about the Kings of Game Weeks 22 and 23 then, please?
Right, we'll do 22 first. We had an 11 in formation of 3-5-2. So we had Sanchez of Brighton in goal. We had our 3 defenders were Wan-Bissaka, Justin and Bogle. We had a midfield of Fernandes, Lingard, Alzate, Jorginho and Maddison. And up front, we had Martial and Billy Sharp. That was our 11 for game week 22. And I think the highest score in there's actually a couple. Joint high scorers were Wan-Bissaka of Manchester United and his teammate Bruno Fernandes. They both had 17 points for the game week. So that was game week 22. And game week 23, we had a team in formation of 3-5-2 again. We had Meslier of Leeds in goal. We had a defence of his teammate Dallas, and we had Tete and Dunk alongside him. Midfield was Foden, Almiron, Gundogan, Jorginho and Decore. And up front, Calvert-Lewin and Werner. And that was the 11 for game week 23. And the highest of those players was Phil Foden. He had 16 points for the week, so he was the highest point scorer for game week 23.
Yeah, I'm not entirely surprised at that. I thought in all the games I watched Foden play last week, he was spectacular. Well, in the second of our new features for this week, we have got the opposition 3 to watch based on performances in the Fantasy Football League. So, Crystal Palace, where are we with this, Dave?
Well, it's actually 2 to watch because the highest scoring player is, and this is up to, again, the end of game week 23, is Will Sahar. He's the only one over 100 points for Crystal Palace. He's got 102, but we're fairly certain he won't be playing on Saturday. But the other 2 are goalkeeper Vicente Gaeta with 77 points. And the third place player is the one we actually picked as our one to watch when we did the reverse fixture early on in the season, and that was Eberiche Eze with 74 points.
Excellent. So what does that do now in terms of the Fantasy League, Dave? Are we up to date? What's happening next week?
Well, we are up to date, but again, it depends with the midweek matches now and which game week they get included in. It's going to be a little bit tricky, so it'd just be a case of bear with us. We'll do the updates for the upcoming preview shows with whatever games we've got available, or it may be there might be one time where we're just in the middle of a week, we can't do anything, and if we do that, we'll do what we've done before. We'll either get someone else on, or maybe we'll look at a particular aspect of it in terms of form or high scoring players or something like that. So we'll certainly have something on Fantasy Premier League every week with whatever's available.
Excellent. And managers, good luck in the meantime. Let us know how you are getting along.
Statman Dave's quiz question.
And finally, Dave, we close out this week's preview show with, of course, this week's quiz question. Take it away.
Yeah, this week's quiz question is, Sean Dyche has been in charge for both of Burnley's most recent wins against Crystal Palace at Selhurst Park. We've mentioned them both in the earlier in the show. But before that, who was the previous Burnley manager to oversee an away win against Crystal Palace, and what was the year?
Excellent. Tom, without revealing your answer, do you know this?
I reckon I could have a good stab at that one.
Excellent. Well, before we go off air, before we close off the call, we will get your view, see if you've got it right. Dave, everybody else, how do they submit their answers, please?
Yes, if you want to get in touch with your guest, please do. You can tweet us or preferably send us a direct message on Twitter. That means that your answer isn't revealed to anyone else. That's at No Nay Never. You can email us, and again, no one will see your email. That's podcast@nonaynever.net. Or you can also reply to the post for this preview show on either the No Nay Never Facebook page or on YouTube, and we'll reveal the correct answer, as we always do, at the start of the next preview show.
Excellent. Community news then. Dave, have we got anything else that we need to share with our listeners? Any changes in fixtures? I'll tell you what we have got before we move on. Tom, how did you think about Burnley's announcement this morning that they are professionalising the women's team?
Yeah, that's it's really good news. Like a lot of clubs are doing that now. You know, we're finally sort of moving into the 21st century as regards to women's football in this country. I've been down and watched. So they play Derby women's team, who are in the same division. They play in the village that I live in.
Oh wow!
So whenever Burnley play away at Derby, I do go down and watch. I went to the one. I think it was the last football match I went to actually just before the lockdown, was Derby v Burnley in the women's football. So yeah, it'd be nice to see the standard improve there, and hopefully be able to go to a few more games when they start moving up the divisions.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, our chairman's targeted 2025 as a promotion to the women's championship, which would just be fantastic if we can do that within 3 years. Obviously, the clubs being taken out from under the role of under the umbrella of in the community side and taken straight into the actual club itself. The girls are going to be sharing Barnfield Training Centre with the senior men. They're going to have access to all of the same facilities and training and exposure. I'm just absolutely delighted. I mean, obviously Burnley are my club, but in terms of Women's Super League and things like that, I tend to watch City because traditionally City ladies, because they'd been our most local side in terms of sort of top flight women's football, and it's great. I don't need to follow them anymore. I can carry on following Burnley right the way up to the Women's Super League, which is going to be fantastic. Dave, nothing else is there to report?
No, I didn't have anything else to add for this week.
Excellent. Well, that is all we have time for. My thanks firstly to Tom. Tom, thank you for giving up your, what day is it? Thursday night, to have to go through that devilish Bournemouth Bournemouth performance and join us for the previous show. It has been a pleasure having you as always.
It's always nice to be on. Thank you very much for having me.
No problem. My thanks also go to VIP John Robertson for his Fixture Flashback contribution. Dave, we need to rename that fixture. I spit my words out every time I say it.
It's alliteration.
I'm not very good at alliteration. To Jay Crame from the Eagles Beak for the Opposition View, who I do now know I know after 3, 2, 1 that his voice got slotted in because while we were recording, his preview came through. So thank you, Jay Crame from the Eagles Beak. To Turf Moor Stadium announcer Dominic Walker for his specially recorded preview show announcements. To producer Matt for producing this and getting it out there. But my final thanks to the main man himself, Dave Roberts, who produces, edits, researches, fact checks, does the whole of the preview show. This is his brainchild, it's his product, and he is phenomenal at doing it. Thank you as ever, Dave. We will be back. Right, when on earth will we be back? We will be back next Friday, I presume, Dave, because we've got a Saturday fixture.
No, before then. Yeah, we've got Fulham, haven't we? Yeah.
Oh my lord! Right, Dave and I will try and do a preview show at some point between now and the Fulham game.
There's good news on that though, because I've prepared it already because the game was postponed. I mean, we did record it for that, if you remember.
Yes.
We'll have to record again, I think.
Do we? Can we not?
Yeah.
Can we not just recycle it? Okay, we might recycle it, but we might not do. But yeah, so there will be. It might be recycled, but there will be a preview show for Fulham, and then obviously next week as well, we'll have the West Bromwich Albion game. I suspect that we will try and. I suspect we'll probably do an analysis show on Thursday, and just because we'll probably put Palace and Fulham together. But I will speak to the rest of the team and see what we want to do about an analysis show. In the meantime, people stay safe. I hope people who are starting to come through with the vaccination programme are doing well and are looking forward to some return to normality. But in the meantime, take care of yourselves and take care of your loved ones. And let's hope that we'll all be together on turf more soon. I've been Natalie Bromley. This has been the No Nay Never podcast. Until next time.